Jai Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotarashta Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhaishanarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Jai Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotarashta Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samavita Gaur Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 16, entitled Praise of King Prithu by the Professional Reciters, texts 9 and 10. Okay, so we'll recite text 9 together. Apyayati asolokam. Apyayati asolokam. Vadanamritamurtina. Vadanamritamurtina. Sanuragavalokena. Sanuraganuvalokena. Vishadasmitacharuna. Vishadasmitacharuna. Apyayati asolokam. Vadanamritamurtina. Sanuragavalokena. Vishadasmitacharuna. Apyayati asolokam. Vadanamritamurtina. Sanuragavalokena. Vishadasmitacharuna. apyayati, enhances, aso, he, lokam, the whole world, vadana, by his face, amritamurtina, moon-like, sa anuraga, affectionate, avalokena, with glances, vishada, bright, smita, smiling, charuna, beautiful. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. This king, Prithu Maharaj, by virtue of his affectionate glances and beautiful moon-like face, which is always smiling with great affection for the citizens, will enhance everyone's peaceful life. Text 10. Avyakta vartmai shanigura karyo gambira veda upagupta vittaha Alanta mahatmya gunaika dhama pritu pracheta iva samvritatma. Translation. The reciters continued, no one will be able to understand the policies the king will follow. His activities will also be very confidential, and it will not be possible for anyone to know how he will make every activity successful. His treasury will always remain unknown to everyone. He will be the reservoir of unlimited glories and good qualities, and his position will be maintained and covered just as Varuna, the deity of the seas, is covered all around by water. Purport. There is a predominating deity for all the material elements, and Varuna or Pracheta is the predominating deity of the seas and the oceans. From outward appearances, the seas and oceans are devoid of life, but a person acquainted with the sea knows that within the water exist many varieties of life. The king of that underwater kingdom is Varuna. Just as no one can understand what is going on beneath the sea, no one could understand what policy King Prithu was following to make everything successful. Indeed, King Prithu's path of diplomacy was very grave. His success was made possible because he was a reservoir of unlimited, glorified qualities. The word upagupta vittaha is very significant in this verse. It indicates that no one would know the extent of the riches King Prithu would confidentially keep. The idea is that not only the king, but everyone should keep his hard-earned money confidentially and secretly, so that in due course of time, the money can be spent for good, practical purposes. In Kali Yuga, however, the king or government has no well-protected treasury, and the only means of circulation is currency notes made of paper. Thus, in times of distress, the government artificially inflates the currency by simply printing papers, and this artificially raises the price of commodities, and the general condition of the citizens becomes very precarious. Thus, keeping one's money very secretly is an old practice, for we find this practice present even during the reign of Maharaj Prithu. Just as the king has the right to keep his treasury confidential and secret, the people should also keep their individual earnings a secret. There is no fault in such dealings. The main point is that everyone should be trained in the system of Varnashram Dharma, so that the money is spent only for good causes and nothing else. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamsha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namustate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priya. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you for coming this morning to Srimad Bhagavatam class. We see here that Maharaj Prithu is getting coronated as the king. Different demigods have approached Prithu Maharaj and they've given him different articles, different gifts, so that he can use these to assist him to rule the kingdom. And here in particular we see in this chapter, it's entitled Praise of King Prithu by the Professional Reciters. So unlike in modern days how we have social media, a bit before social media we had newspapers, emails, all that sort of stuff, where you send a message sitting at your desk and 100,000, millions of people can see that message in an instant. Back in the Vedic times, even not so far back, even if you read Shakespeare's plays, you'll see in many of the plays there's a town bard, a bard. Heralds, bards, reciters, their job is to glorify. They're public glorifiers. So that's what these professional reciters are doing. They're glorifying Prithu Maharaj. And that serves two purposes. One purpose is that it tells Prithu Maharaj what the citizens expect him to be like. Right? They're glorifying him, King Prithu Maharaj, by virtue of his affectionate glances and beautiful moon-like face, is always smiling with great affection for the citizens. Now in the previous chapter, at the end of it, Prithu Maharaj said to everyone present, I'm just being coronated now. I haven't even exhibited these qualities yet. So please don't falsely glorify me. It is not right to glorify a person if that person doesn't have those qualities. So he hasn't demonstrated anything. He's just taken his birth from the body of King Vena. Still the professional reciters are coming, and this whole chapter is dedicated to them glorifying the qualities of the king. So by doing this, King Prithu understands how he should behave so that the citizens will respect him. That's one thing. The second thing is that the citizens can understand what the qualities of a king should be. So that if a king acts contrary to what these professional reciters are saying in this chapter, then the people can understand that the king is not qualified. So they're glorifying him in public. They're making it public. Prithu Maharaj, you have to smile. If you don't smile, that means something's wrong in the kingdom. Some verses before it says, this King Prithu will be very, very kind to all citizens, even though a poor person may trample over the king's head by violating the rules and regulations, the king out of his causeless mercy will be forgetful and forgiving. So they're putting it out into the public. If he doesn't act, if he doesn't show forgiveness, if he doesn't show tolerance, the citizens can understand that he's not acting in the proper ideals of a king. So that's why these professional reciters, they played a very important role in society. If you see, I believe it's the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where it's talking about the household of Swayambhuva Manu. You could say he's the original king. So he enlisted professional reciters in his household as well. Srimad Bhagavatam explains that when Swayambhuva Manu and his family, they drifted off to sleep at night, these professional reciters in his house would recite the pastimes of Ramayana, the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that as Swayambhuva Manu went to sleep, he would be very Krishna conscious. And in the same way, when he woke up in the morning, they would be chanting and glorifying and doing kirtan as well, so that he would wake up in that proper mood as well. Proper Krishna conscious mood. So that's one side point. One senior Vaishnava was saying that, generally we're sleeping at night time and then the alarm goes off in the morning and we have to wake up. And sometimes it's hard to shake ourselves out of that mode of ignorance. So he says, immediately chant the name of Krishna. So as soon as you wake up, just chant, Krishna, 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 Radha Gopinath, Radha Gopinath. And that will snap you out of your mode of ignorance and bring you to the transcendental platform. At least so that you can get up out of bed and take a shower or whatever. So these professional reciters are very important. I know many devotees have spoken about this. This is Srimad Bhagavatam lists King Gaya as a very ideal king as well, Maharaj Gaya. And he demonstrated 4 qualities of an ideal king. Poshana, which means that he took care of the citizens in times of distress. He gave them protection. So that's one important quality of a king, protection. Srila Prabhupada mentions in his purports to the Bhagavad Gita that Kshatriyo hi praja rakshan. The duty of a Kshatriya is to provide protection. Kshat means hurt. Kshatriya or Kshatrayate means one who protects someone from getting hurt. So you can see that on a material platform, Kshatriyas protect their citizens from physical harm and danger. But Srila Prabhupada mentions more importantly that the real enemy, according to Bhagavad Gita, is lust. Lust, in chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that is the real eternal enemy, Nitya Vairana, of the soul. And therefore it is the Kshatriya's duty to himself first be established as a Raja Rishi, beyond the 3 modes of material nature, guided by the Brahmanas, guided by the Vaishnavas, and in turn create policies and programs within his kingdom so that the whole population will be Krishna conscious. So Poshanam. Second thing that Maharaj Gaya did was Prinanam. He addressed his citizens in very kind words. He didn't present himself as a dictator, as some sort of an autocrat, just wielding power. No. It's explained that the leader is actually the biggest servant. So, the dharma of the soul. What is dharma? Dharma means a characteristic or a quality which cannot be changed. It's an intrinsic characteristic. That's what dharma means. So the dharma of water is liquidity. The dharma of fire is heat and light. You can't separate heat and light from fire. Similarly, it's explained that the dharma of the soul is service. The soul is always a servant. The soul is always serving something else or someone else. So the king is also a servant. If you take the so-called highest position in this mature world, you could say the president or prime minister of a certain country, that person who occupies that post has to serve all of the citizens. Otherwise, they're not going to elect that person in the next round of elections. So he has to show some service attitude. And similarly, everyone under him, to the sweeper in the street, is also a servant as well. So the king, yes, he's ruling, he's Naradeva, he's a representative of Krishna, but at the same time, he's the servant of everyone in his kingdom. And he's the servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as well. Upalalana is the third quality that Maharaj Gaya demonstrated. Upalalana means that Maharaj Gaya would often call meetings with all of his citizens to come and discuss how they could better the kingdom, how he could better rule the kingdom as well. So he didn't just take the guidance just from whatever he thought was right, whatever the Brahmanas thought was right, but he actually wanted to understand what each one of the citizens was going through. How was the harvest in the kingdom? Were people having any issues, any family issues? You know, it's explained in the Mahabharata that when Yudhishthira Maharaj was ruling Hastinapur, there was a bell. And any time a citizen wanted to approach Yudhishthira Maharaj, they just had to come to the court and just ring the bell. And the king himself would directly give personal audience to that citizen. And anyone could come. Even some poor farmer or something like that, anyone in the citizen, some homeless person, anyone was allowed to come and ring that bell and address the king, ask the king questions. Because the king knew that he was getting 1/6 of the karmic reactions of whatever the citizens were doing in his kingdom. That's why it's not like they could just shun certain sections of society, this section of society is not important. So let's just put them in a box, put them somewhere. Every single person in society, even the animals, were important. The duty of the Kshatriya was to also protect the animals as well. So we have Upalalana and Anushasana. Perhaps the most important duty of a king, which is he taught his citizens how to be Krishna conscious. That's the prime duty of a king. Because he's representing Krishna, right? And it's mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam that actually Krishna doesn't want this mature world to exist. He doesn't want this mature world to exist. Still, despite his desire that it shouldn't exist, he still creates this mature world. Why? Because his fragmental parts and parcels desire it. So, Prabhupada mentions to make the best use of a bad bargain. Krishna, he creates this mature world where the conditioned souls can enjoy within it, and over a period of many lifetimes they can get frustrated, burnt out, then naturally they turn to Krishna. So that is the purpose of this mature world. My Guru Maharaj mentions two purposes of this mature world. One purpose I just mentioned right now. It's a place where the conditioned souls can try to be happy. It's a place where we can play out our material desires and realize our frustration in the end. So that develops vairagya, that develops renunciation in the conditioned soul. The second purpose of the mature world is to provide contact points. This is what my Guru Maharaj mentions, to provide contact points between devotees of the Lord and conditioned souls. If there were no devotees in this world, conditioned souls would not be able to get out of this mature world, go back to home, back to Godhead. Because the nature of Maya is that she'll not allow you to learn the lesson. There's no knowledge department in Maya. If you do something wrong, if you perform some sense gratification act, if you perform an act against the law, if you perform some sinful act, temporarily you may realize that I shouldn't have done that. But that desire within the heart, the seed within the heart to commit that act again does not go away. So the propensity, the inclination, the tendency still remains in the heart to do the wrong thing. So that can only be eliminated by bhakti. That can only be eliminated by association with devotees, because bhakti sanjayate bhakti. Which means that bhakti gives rise to bhakti. Nothing in this world other than bhakti can give rise to bhakti. So when a conditioned soul meets a devotee, and the devotee presents a book, and the conditioned soul just touches the book, that is the starting of the bhakti for that conditioned soul. That simple act will allow that conditioned soul, either in this lifetime or some future lifetime, to become a pure devotee of Krishna. Just that act. So, the second purpose of the mature world is to provide contacts, contact points between devotees and conditioned souls. Now there's 6 principles which, if you ever met a king, you should talk to him about, you should ask him about. And Srila Prabhupada mentions this. I can't remember where, but definitely I do remember reading this in Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatam purports. And I believe it's from Arthashastra, Chanakya Niti. There are 6 things which are very important for a king, since we're talking about King Prithu, his coronation, and his leadership role that he's in. First thing is Sena. Everyone knows what Sena means? Sena means army. The army is very important for a king. Even though the king and his kingdom, they may not be belligerent, they may not be inimical to anyone else, still, if someone else is waging war upon the king and his kingdom, the king needs an army to protect his kingdom. So the army is not necessarily to wage war on others, but the army is there to protect one's kingdom. We see in Ramayana that although Lord Ramachandra single-handedly killed 14,000 Rakshasas, right, in Ramayana, single-handedly, he slayed 14,000 Rakshasas. I think Khar and Dushan, he was killing 2 demons, and they had their army, 14,000 Rakshasas. He slayed all of them. But still, just to set an example, that he was apparently dependent. When he went to get Sita back, he enlisted the help of Sugriva, he enlisted the help of Hanuman, and what is it, like 10 to the power of something Vanaras? Does anyone know how much that number is? 10 to the power of 69, something like that. 10 to the power of 69 monkeys assisted Lord Ramachandra to wage war on Ravan and to bring back Sita. Actually, this is not a point which is very much talked about so much. We often glorify Lord Ramachandra for being very virtuous, righteous, and indeed, he is the emblem of that. And we glorify him for Ekapatni Vrat. He took one wife, right? But actually, Srila Prabhupada gives an alternate interpretation of why he only took one wife. Because Lord Ramachandra's pastimes explain, they demonstrate that just by taking one wife, just by us having one spouse, a wife can have a husband can have a wife, Lord Ram had to undergo so much difficulty and so much meditation. Oh, what is wrong with my wife? What's happening to her now? What must Ravana and the Rakshasis be doing to my wife? Is she alive? Is she dead? So much of his attention was focused on Sita that he couldn't focus on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, Sita is a goddess of Lakshmi. Lord Ramachandra is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if we put ourselves in his position, then Srila Prabhupada mentions that even by having one spouse, so much of our attention is diverted from Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Lord Ramachandra's pastimes say that we should just focus our lives single-pointedly, just on it, developing our relationship with Krishna only. So this is an alternative interpretation of Lord Ramachandra's Ekapatni Vrat that Srila Prabhupada gives in his purport. So we talked about Sena. The second most important thing for a king is Kosha, which refers to his treasury. A king needs treasury so that there's proper functioning of his kingdom. There's trade, there's commerce going on. So this is very important. The king's citizens are taxed as well, but in return, the king is responsible for providing them protection. It says, I believe it's in Prithu Maharaj's pastimes, that if a king cannot provide adequate, sufficient protection to his citizens, he's not allowed to tax them. So translate that to modern day society, where in the 12th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, in the purpose there, it's explained that as Kali Yuga progresses, the citizens will be taxed more and more and more. So much excessive taxation there will be in societies as Kali Yuga progresses that citizens will be so harassed by the government that they will be forced to go and flee and live in the forest. I remember Kadamba Maharaj, he mentioned that in Kali Yuga, as time progresses, people would live underground. And we see a parallel of that in that movie, The Matrix, how people are living actually underground. They're plugged into this virtual reality world. So Maharaj was mentioning that people would live underground. And there would be a shoot-on-sight policy, because everyone would be atheistic, the government would be atheistic. And if there was any devotees, if anyone came up above ground and, the government, the so-called police, the so-called Kshatriyas at that time, if they saw a devotee, there would be a shoot-on-sight policy, Maharaj was mentioning, as Kali Yuga progresses. So, Sena, Kosha, Mitra. Mitra means friend, which means allies. A king has to have good allies. Because a king realizes that for him to be actually very powerful, he can't do it by himself. He needs allies. So we see even in Mahabharata, when the Pandavas were in their 13 years of exile, they took this opportunity to form alliances and friendships with other kings, right? We see even Kamsa, even though not the best role model, but still Kamsa was also forming alliances and allies with other demons as well to become more powerful. So the king's power is increased through good allies as well. So we have Sena, Kosha, Mitra, Danda. What does Danda mean? It means the rod. So if it comes to it, a king is supposed to show Danda, the rod, for punishment. Of course, here Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that in the Prabhupada that Maharaj Pritu's diplomacy was very deep, very grave. Sama, Beda, Dana, Danda, these are 4 different principles of diplomacy which are mentioned in Mahabharata. But Danda is the final thing that a king should use, which means direct punishment. Sama means first to try to resolve something, the king should glorify the other party. If that doesn't work, then the king should try to give gifts to try to appease the other person. That's called Dana. If that doesn't work, then there should be a divide and rule policy, a divide and conquer policy, to create some sort of dissension in the enemy camp. That's called Beda. And if that doesn't work, then comes Danda at the end. So we see in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, first or second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that when Kali Purush, first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Kali Purush was there in the kingdom of Parikshit Maharaj was there immediately on the scene. And what did Parikshit Maharaj do? He got out his sword and he was about to cut the head of Kali Purush off. Kali Purush submitted himself before Parikshit Maharaj. Of course, he was dressed like a king as well, an impostor. But Kshatriya rules state that if someone surrenders to you, you're not allowed to kill them. I was just reading in 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam when the big Vritrasura demon comes, when Twashta from his yagya creates this big Vritrasura demon, huge demon. His head is touching the clouds, he's got copper bronze hair and mustache and beard and very fearsome teeth and fearsome eyes. And Vritrasura is the leader of the demons and he's attacking the demigods. And it comes to a point where Indra is very powerful, very strong. And so the demons actually start to flee the battlefield. And as the demons are fleeing the battlefield, the demigods, they chase after the demons and they attack them while the demons' backs are facing the demigods. And then Vritrasura starts chastising the demigods. This is not the proper Kshatriya code. This is not chivalrous. This should not be done. Right? So Danda. Danda is important for a king to show as well. Then comes Durga. This is the 5th point. Durga. Durga means? Anyone know? Fort. Yeah, we have Durga Devi, the wife of Lord Shiva. Because she is called Durga because she shackles the conditioned souls. Generally, if a criminal goes to prison, the criminal has physical shackles on his wrists, on his arms, sometimes his legs, so that he can't escape. But Durga Devi has shackled the conditioned souls with a very strong handcuff, and that is the handcuff of sex desire, Prabhupada mentions. Because of that sex desire which is in the heart of the conditioned souls don't desire to go back home, back to Godhead. They want to stay here in this material world. And Srila Prabhupada mentions that from sex desire, that is the root of all other material desires in this material world. So that's why Srila Prabhupada mentions that sex desire and Krishna consciousness go ill together. For one who's practicing Krishna consciousness, one should not cultivate any material desires. So fort. We see that when Jarasandha and Kalayavana was attacking Krishna in Mathura, they attacked 17 times, and Kalayavana came in the final attack, the 18th time, and Jarasandha was coming from the other side, and they were sieging the city, right? And everyone inside Mathura was afraid. What did Krishna do? Overnight, he transferred his whole population to Dwarka, to a sea kingdom out in the ocean, in an island. So there is an example from Shastra where the king creates a very powerful fortress, Durga. So it's important for a king to create very strong defenses in his kingdom. And finally comes Rashtra. Rashtra means good governance, a good kingdom. So the king should make sure that in his kingdom, everyone is properly following Krishna consciousness, everyone is properly following the principles of Varnashram Dharma. So these are the 6 principles of good governance as laid out by the Artha Shastra and Chanakya Niti that kings should follow. One more thing that we can see here, if you see in text 9, it says, "This king, Prithu Maharaj, by virtue of his affectionate glances and beautiful moon-like face, which is always smiling with great affection for the citizens, will enhance everyone's peaceful life." Now there's this thing, recently we were discussing it with the brahmacharis. There's this thing in Shastra called Praman. And Praman means evidence. So Srila Vyasadeva has listed 10 different types of evidences. Generally, when we talk about bhakti, we talk about 3 evidences. One is called Shabda Praman. Shabda Praman means that you can understand something about something through written testimony. For example, I know that Krishna exists because in the Shastra it's mentioned that. I know that I'm not the body, but I'm the soul because in the Shastra it's mentioned that. In the Bhagavad Gita it's mentioned that. So the Shastra is Shabda Praman. On a materialistic platform, a science student would understand that water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen because the science textbooks explain that. So for a scientist, the scientific books, the scientific journals, they're the Shabda Praman. Right? So one source of evidence is Shabda Praman. Another source of evidence is Anuman Praman, which means inference. So if I was hearing, if you were outside, if we were all outside the temple room, and we were hearing some noises in this temple room, right? We were hearing some instruments, mridangas like that. We didn't see what's going on in the temple room, but from previous experience, we can understand that if some kartal sounds are going on in the temple room, mridanga sounds are going on in the temple room, that means darshan might be open, that means devotees are doing kirtan. So we're not seeing that because we're standing outside, but we're inferring based on the circumstances. That is called Anuman Praman. And the other one is called Pratyaksha Praman. Pratyaksha Praman means understanding something through our senses, through our material senses. So these are the 3 pramanas. Now, one more praman is given by Vyasadeva. There's 10, but another one is called Cheshta. Cheshta means understanding something through gestures. Everyone understands what gestures mean? Facial expressions, hand positions. For example, what does this mean? If you see someone doing this, what does it mean? Yeah, the person is praying. The person is in a very submissive mood, a very humble mood. So in the mudra, this hand gesture is called Anjali Mudra. This is called Anjali Mudra. If you see Srimati Radharani, she's going like this. So what does this mean? Blessing. Protection. It actually means protection. It's called Abhaya Mudra. Abhaya means fearlessness. So when someone is going like this, it's called Abhaya Mudra. Means they're bestowing fearlessness upon others. If you see pictures of goddess Lakshmi or Ganesh, they'll be doing like this. So what is that? What is this mudra called? It is called Varada Mudra. Varada. Varada means boons. It means that that particular personality is ready to give you benedictions and boons. This is called Varada Mudra. It's explained that when Vibhishan was crossing the sea between Sri Lanka and coming to India, coming to the very southern tip of India, Lord Ramachandra and his army of monkeys, they saw Vibhishan coming, but because he was Ravana's brother, they couldn't trust him. So when Vibhishan was coming, he was coming like this to signify to Lord Ram that I mean no harm, I mean no danger. So this shows that we can understand something through gesture. Now what gesture is Gopinath showing on his beautiful face? A beautiful sweet smile, right? And Gopinath is the cynosure of our eyes. He's the main personality, not only in this temple, in the whole of Sydney, in the whole of creation. Everyone comes to see the beautiful face of Gopinath. Now what would you do if you all went to see the face of Gopinath and Gopinath was not smiling? Gopinath had a frown on his face, or Gopinath had a very stern look on his face. That would completely shatter all of your hearts, right? All of our hearts. That's why for a famous personality,
for a great personality, their cheshta, their gestures are very important because they can influence the minds of everyone else. Yeah, whatever actions a great man performs, common men follow. Whatever exemplary deeds or examples he sets, the whole world pursues, it says. Yad yad achariti shreshtas tat tat evetaro jana sayat pramanam krute lokastat anuvartate. And therefore it is important for Prithu Maharaj to show a smile on his face. Because by him showing affectionate glances and smiles upon the citizens, it gives them solace, it gives them confidence, and it gives them the understanding that everything is going on very nicely in the kingdom. So cheshta is very important. Now here, we can bring out one more point. Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that in Kali Yuga, however, the king or government has no well-protected treasury, and the only means of circulation is currency notes made of paper. Thus, in times of distress, the government artificially inflates the currency simply by printing papers. And this artificially raises the prices of commodities, and the general condition of the citizens becomes very precarious. So, a real-life example of this actually happened back in 1920, more than a century ago, when World War I had just finished. Of course, Germany was at the center of that, and they had incurred a large war debt. They had purchased a lot of ammunition, a lot of different things, and Germany had incurred a very large war debt. So instead of changing their monetary policies, what the government in Germany decided to do was just print more cash. Let's just print more cash, and therefore we can pay off our debts. This actually led to a thing called hyperinflation in Germany in the 1920s, where the government printed so much cash, there was so much excessive cash that was circulating within the country, that people who were selling things, they had to increase the price of their commodities because those people had so much cash, right? So if toothpaste costs $2, right, and if everyone here has $5, okay, if I'm selling toothpaste, I'll keep it at $2. But if all of a sudden everyone here has $1 million each in cash, the person who's selling the toothpaste is not going to keep it at $2. They're going to increase it to 500,000. So Germany had to increase the price of all of their commodities, and there was a situation of hyperinflation of Germany, where just to buy a loaf of bread at your local baker, there are pictures of this. There are pictures of Germans wheeling a wheelbarrow full of cash into a baker's shop just to buy a loaf of bread. Money had completely lost its value. Bums on the street, homeless people on the street were using cash as a source of fire to light wood, because firewood was more valuable than cash. There are pictures of German children at that point in time. You know how with cards, we build houses with cards like that. So they were tying bundles of cash together with rubber bands, and they were building houses with cash. Tall houses made of cash. Because money had lost its value. Because the government printed excessive cash to try to get themselves out of the war debt. So this is a real life example of hyperinflation. What can happen? And nowadays it's worse, right? People are stopping to use cash as well. Right? Physical money is becoming slowly a thing of the past. Now everything is you just tap your watch, you just tap a card on a screen, and you just log onto your net bank account, and your wealth is just some digits on a screen. Your wealth is just some pixels on a monitor. That's it. It's just a bunch of numbers. So that is wealth in Kali Yuga. But what does Vedic society tell us? What is real wealth? 4 things. Real wealth is 4 things. Real wealth is in land. If you possess land, you are wealthy. If you possess cows, you are wealthy. Because milk is the miracle food. Right? Butter, cheese, yogurt, all these things, ghee. It says that by eating foods in the mode of goodness like milk, it slowly purifies the consciousness. And then one can come to the mode of goodness, and from that mode of goodness, one can springboard to liberation. Srila Prabhupada quotes a shloka in his Bhagavad Gita purports there. Ahar shuddho sattva shuddho dhruva smriti lambe sarva granthinam vipramoksha. That's the shloka that Prabhupada quotes. Land, cows, food. You need food. If you don't have food, you're not a wealthy person. And one more thing is there. Cows, land, food. Gold, yes, that's the one. Gold. Speaking of cash, cash is supposed to be backed up by gold, right? But if you print cash, it's no longer backed up by gold. So if you have gold, silver, copper, all these rare metals, they're limited supplies of this, right? So they will always retain value. So Shastra says that these four things give real wealth to a person. I'll just finish by just telling one quick story of a great Vaishnava from the Sri Sampradaya. His name is Tirumangai Alvar. In Sri Sampradaya, there's 12 different Alvars, or they're 12 Acharyas. Tirumangai Alvar was one of the Acharyas. Because here Prabhupada is talking about how we should use our treasury, we should use our earnings for the right purposes, right? Whatever wealth we have. So Tirumangai Alvar is a good example of that. He was actually, you know how Krishna carries different weapons? Krishna's disc is called Sudarshan. Krishna's club is called Komudaki. Krishna's bow is called Sharanga. So the Sharanga bow incarnated as Tirumangai Alvar. So that personality was originally, transcendently Krishna's bow. He was known as Narakavi Perumal. Please tell me if I'm saying it right, bro. Narakavi Perumal, which means the master of poets. He was known as Kala, I don't know, something, which basically means that he had conquered time, he had conquered death. So he was a very great personality. But he was born a Shudra. He was born in the household of a Shudra. But even though he was a Shudra, he had a very strong body. He was very powerful. He was fearless. So at that time, that part of India was ruled by the Chola dynasty, the Chola kings, the very famous kings, Chola dynasty. So one day, the Chola king was in a battle with someone. And this particular person, Tirumangai Alvar, he was a Shudra at that time. He was enlisted in the army, and he single-handedly killed 1,000 soldiers. And this very much pleased the king. So in return, as a favor, the king granted him rulership of a certain part of his kingdom. That part of his kingdom was called Tirumangai. So that's where the name comes from, Tirumangai Alvar. Now, he becomes a king, and with that comes wealth, with that comes wine, with it comes women, all that sort of stuff. So because he was a Shudra, he was not trained in a Gurukul, he was not trained in self-control, all this sort of stuff. So all this position of a king started to slowly degrade him. He started to lose all of his good qualities. But Vishnu, I'm not sure why, but Vishnu decides to favor him. And he sends one Apsara, actually. There's a story behind this Apsara we don't have time to get into now. But this Apsara, she was from the heavenly planets originally. And one day she was going to Badrikashram, where Kapila Muni was there, and Kapila Muni was giving a Bhagavatam class to his disciples. And one of his disciples, he looked a bit funny. Physically had some deformity. So this particular Apsara laughed at that disciple. And then Kapila Muni cursed that Apsara that you will have to take birth as a mortal on earth. So one day this Apsara had come to this place, Tirumangai, because there were beautiful lakes there. And when the demigods and the Apsaras, they come to this earthly planet, they're only allowed to come at night time. If they remain here when the sun comes up, then they are cursed to stay here in this earthly realm. They have to take a birth here. So this Apsara was there in Tirumangai. She was frolicking in some lakes, some rivers there. And she didn't notice but the sun had risen, and therefore she was cursed to take birth as a mortal. So her name was Kumudavalli. So Tirumangalvar becomes attracted to this lady, Kumudavalli. And he approaches her directly. She says no. Then he approaches her through her father. And then somehow the match happens. And on two conditions. Tirumangalvar is allowed to marry Kumudavalli on two conditions. And she herself gives these two conditions. The first condition is that Tirumangalvar should conduct Pancha Samskar, 5 samskars. So I don't know exactly what they are, but one of them is like you have to chant the holy name, you have to take a vow to chant the holy name, you have to take initiation, you have to wear tilaks every day on your body. So like that, there's 5 different purifications. The second one, the second condition, this is the important one, is called Tiruvardhanam. Tiruvardhanam means that if Tirumangalvar wants to marry this Apsara, he has to every single day feed 1008 Vaishnavas. That was part of the deal, Tiruvardhanam. And he takes it up. Every single day he holds a feast for 1008 Vaishnavas. And that slowly starts to purify him. He no longer has an attachment based on bodily concept to his wife. He starts to genuinely become a Vaishnava. He starts to get detached from his kingly position. But that requires a lot of money. So he's using all the wealth from his treasury as a king for this purpose, and the treasury runs out, and then desperately he goes to a place where they put a stock of treasury, like when the citizens pay 1/6 of their earnings to the king, that is stored somewhere else. Tirumangalvar, he goes there as well. And he takes that wealth as well, and he uses that as well. That gets exhausted as well. And then the army turns on the king because now he's not ruling the kingdom properly. He doesn't have treasury. So he's no longer a king. He becomes a burglar. He becomes a thief. And his technique, his strategy, his tactic to get money so that he could feed 1008 Vaishnavas every day was that he had a band of bandits. He had a band of bandits, a gang of bandits, and they would hide on top of trees in a forest, and when people, merchants, wealthy people would pass through the forest, they would jump down from the trees and steal all of their wealth, and from that wealth he would use that to feed 1008 Vaishnavas. So one day, it was nighttime, and a marriage party was passing through the forest. And Tirumangalvar, he says to all of his friends, his companions, these guys look really wealthy. If we steal everything from them, we wouldn't have to commit burglary, theft for the next 1 year. This marriage party is so wealthy. So they jump down. And, they pull out their swords and their arrows and they seize everyone. Everyone has to put up their hands. And then they start to put all of the jewelry that the marriage party has in big sacks. And Tirumangalvar tells his friends, okay, carry these sacks away. But when they go to lift them, they can't lift the sacks. They can't even drag the sacks. It's never happened to them before. They can't drag the wealth. And the groom, on his toe, he's wearing a very special toe ring. And it is the most wealthiest treasure which is there. And Tirumangalvar approaches him and he says, I want that ring. Give it to me. If you don't give it to me, I'll sever it. I'll cut off your toe. And the groom is not scared, nothing like that. And I don't know how it happens, but just to humiliate the groom, Tirumangalvar decides to use his teeth to take off that ring. He decides to use his teeth to wrench off that ring from that toe. And as soon as he puts his mouth on that ring next to that groom's toe, he transforms himself. He becomes a pure devotee. Because that groom was actually Narayan. That groom was actually Lord Vishnu. And he was with his consort Lakshmi. And because he was doing so much service for the Vaishnavas, Lord Narayan and Lakshmi Devi themselves had come to give their darshan. And it's mentioned that that groom transforms into his four-handed form and he gives darshan to Tirumangalvar. And he gives him the ashta, the mantra with 8 syllables, Om Namo Narayanaya. That's the mantra that he gets initiated in. And he becomes a very great poet. He compiles very great devotional poetry to glorify Lord Vishnu. So like that, we have many different Vaishnavas. Another example is Raghunath Das Goswami as well, who came from a very wealthy family, used his wealth to serve the Vaishnavas. So main point here is that the king is an important personality. He should be very strict and have a very clean and ideal personality to rule over the citizens. And he should do so in a very Krishna-conscious way as well, using his wealth and treasury for the right purposes. That's the theme of today's verse. So we'll finish here. We'll over time, so we won't take questions today. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.